ton of opportunity there, and because it's B2B, everyone kind of shies away from it because it's risk, it's different, you know. Everyone says B2B is boring, doesn't have to be.
The 7 triggers that make people want to share your content. I thought this was a cool article because I think it drew in not just stuff for writing, but also part of it prompts for getting you to think about what's engaging. And I like that I think it has a wider application than just writing. So I wanted to see if you guys saw anything that jumped out at you that either you think we're doing well or that got you guys thinking about new ways that we could be, I don't know, thinking about content, social design, things like that. If anybody wants to start.
I actually think one thing that we do really well here at Presh is taking the content and finding graphics and images that surround your content. I think we do a phenomenal job at that. Another thing that I found interesting about this article, because you always hear the term clickbait, right? Which is kind of what this article is talking about, but it's fascinating because it's kind of leaving those cliffhangers for your potential audience.
Yeah.
So that they click on your article and then they have to actually like read the article to
which I think
answer the question.
definitely works. But then I think another key here is that you actually have to answer the questions.
Yeah.
You can't get caught up in making this really great headline and then realizing that it doesn't address the content well, or we don't answer the questions that we say we will.
So what's valuable? I mean, it's kind of part one is getting people to care and getting them there in the first place. Part two is actually keeping them there. And I think what this is talking about is how do you actually get them to want to tell other people and actually be an advocate about it, which is a totally different thing. You know, if you're answering something that, I mean, you gotta think in our space, it's even more challenging because it's your profession and career. You know, if it's something that you feel might be elementary that you might have a question around, you might not want to share that with the world, right? If there was a marketing one-on-one article and I was trying to find something out about marketing and I read that, probably wouldn't want to tell the world, hey, look what I had to go about, you know? So I think that's one of the things that's really difficult on the IT side, but that's kind of when you break it down to if it's something topical, if it's something that is really right now in the moment, that definitely is something that people want to share and want to educate their peers about. I think that's more current now than ever on the IT side. So it's kind of all those 3 different categories and how do you approach each one differently.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting as far as like length goes, how like long form content does better. Which is sort of like, I would have thought that shorter form would have done better because people's attention spans, or at least mine at least, is sometimes I want to read like an article very quickly and move on sometimes. But I don't know, it's kind of interesting to see that it is like 1,500 words or more, which is like, it's pretty lengthy.
Which kind of reflects like Facebook making videos longer. I was thinking it might have something to do with if you're putting your name to something and you're sharing something, you want to make sure people know that you're sharing this valuable thing. Since this was kind of measuring in terms of shareability, I could maybe see why a professional wouldn't want to share an infographic when they could share a full ebook. You know,
So it's interesting that if you think of even what we just said, there's kind of like the clickbait side of getting people there, but getting people to actually stay there and making them feel like there's value there. There's a perceived value and there's a body of knowledge. Like you said, people kind of skim and they go through it and they want the answer as quick as possible. The reality is when people first look at an article, the first thing they do, at least myself, I go from the beginning of the article all the way to the end and I read the headlines. And then if there's value in it and I see something that catches my eye, I start reading it more. And the more content that's there, the more headlines that are there, and the more information that's there, you know, the more likely I am to actually see something that I'm going to continue looking into. And I think too, there's the side that there's content overload happening in the marketing space right now. When people try to go out and do a quick 300, 400 word article, the reality is like you can't address that many topics in 300 words. So just as a result, the quality of it ends up being much less than what a much larger article would be. So I think a lot of times we're taught as marketers to look at the data, and the data says if it's 1,500 words, it must be good. I think the reality is that you can't answer a lot of questions in detail in 300, 400 words. So just by like the nature of like understanding something, it kind of has to be that long. Now I do think that Google has, like that exact reason, search-wise, they've adjusted their formula to prioritize long-form content that is over 1,500 words. And therefore, data-driven marketers are now saying it's gotta be 1,500 words, it's gotta be 1,500 words, when in some cases it could be answered in a paragraph or less. Things are now kind of just being, overemphasized, and there's things that have to just be added in as filler content or something like that, just to make it get to that amount. So it's an interesting time as far as the length piece, but it's an important part of it. What do you think, Chris?
No, I think,
You have an ask shirt on, so you gotta ask for it.
I'm so smart now. But from a design point of view, they made a comment here that when people first look at your content, they have a series of subconscious micro impressions. So it's not only making our content really visually appealing, but when they first look at it, it has to be really digestible, right? So when they look at it, it has to follow a certain logical path. It should be clear and upfront what the content is about. We can overwhelm them when we have a lot of things going on. So when we can keep it simple and make it easy to understand, then it makes for great content.
What do you think?
I think having the content being easily digestible, like Chris was saying, skimmable, where people like me that don't want to read the entire article unless it's something that's really relevant, you're saying, is important. Having a strategic call to action, what are they supposed to do next, is important. They can just read the content and digest it, but is there a specific point that we're trying to make or a specific action that we want them to take after they digest it?
That makes sense. I think the important part there too is that next step is critical, but I can tell you that 99 times out of 100, it is completely what the marketer wants the person to do versus what the person actually wants to do. Like, having an article about a product, and it's saying, go buy it. Like, you can click here to buy it, or click here to go download this thing that's completely irrelevant, right? Sure, that's like the path that we put in place, and it looks great on paper because we can say there's a path, but is that really what the person wanted to do? And I think the more that we can shift our mindset over to what they want to do, what matters to them, what actually is enough value for them. Because if you think of like what started that whole process, like it had nothing to do with they wanted to just go read this killer blog, right? That's not really what it was. It was they wanted an answer to a question. They wanted to learn about a topic, and this resource, and it might be a blog, or it might be a video, or it might be something else, was what addressed that for them and answered that for them. And if there's enough value that has piqued their interest to where they want to go learn more about it, or they want to go do one specific thing, it's not really relevant, or maybe it could be relevant in our space as far as conferences go, but I think if someone was, looking up an event and they wanted to see reviews from last year's event, a call to action there doesn't need to be go download the ultimate guide to events. It could be here's $10 off your event registration. Like that's a very meaningful call to action. It's like, wow, I really, this sounds like a great event. And here's something of value that I look at as perceived value. It's currency, which is really valuable in our culture. That's where I think we've got to. I think that's where we can improve and probably do a better job on is that next step, that call to action is so incredibly important. But shifting it over to what's valuable to them versus us is where that shift needs to take place. And that's across the board in marketing. It's everywhere. Lori, what do you think?
Well, I agree with a lot. I still am surprised at content length because me, I like visuals and I like bullet points and I like it simple. And then that was the one thing about the checklist and step by step. And I think about some of our great content has been for Datacom, that employee security awareness template. That gets downloaded all the time. Yeah. And I think it's usable. It's not just a step-by-step. And even back when we used to have a lot downloading the marketing game plan stuff, as opposed to, guides. They're just passive information, but they really don't, you know, I don't know, I just think those are more appealing to me, worksheets and stuff like that. And then I'm looking at this one about the social currency, you know, set to share triggers. I'm thinking about, you know, how we don't necessarily engage with other influencers, and I'm specifically thinking about my client, Dr. Stein, and he sort of, that's one of the things he's asking me about, like, you know, to sort of leverage some of those relationships, you know, with the dispensaries and kind of be sharing on their site, and, you know, getting them to share on, because they have so many followers and stuff like that. So how to do that with an influencer?
That's a really good point. I mean, because marketing is so, as an industry, just chasing the shiny object at all times, right? Whatever's new is what everyone just goes running towards, and never really is a strategy or anything. It's just, that's what I'm told is the new greatest thing. Let's go do that thing, right? I think that this term influencer marketing, one, B2B has just kind of shunned it, saying it just doesn't apply to B2B because their influence is who they work with in their title, and therefore they can't really use that to market themselves. So it's not a key play. And honestly, I've heard of, if you go online and look up the greatest B2B influencer campaigns, I mean, they're endorsement deals with like athletes and stuff. I mean, it's not even really what true. I mean, that's kind of like influencer marketing in that case. Like, that's been around forever. Where I think there's a lot of value that is kind of, it's leveraging social influence and like what it calls here social currency. And the exact example, Lori, that you gave around, you know, partnerships with other pages and other companies. I mean, there's so much benefit in that. I mean, the ability to, instead of just reposting an article or sharing an article on social that somebody wrote, actually tagging them and interacting with them and engaging with them and leveraging their audience and getting them to talk about it as well. That's where the value is. And I mean, the value in B2B too, of being able to directly engage with other companies. I mean, everyone kind of knew what's happening for a while. You know, marketing, kind of how it's progressed, it's gone from back in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, companies told you who they were. They said, we're Coca-Cola and we care about the environment and we do all these things, right? And there's no feedback outside of the market determining if they're gonna buy or not. Transition to a world where Twitter and other platforms are viewed as a customer service tool, and there's now this ability for people to proactively say who the company is versus them saying who they are, and even like Google reviews or even Yelp about in restaurant space. I mean, people all of a sudden had the power to say, this is actually who they are, and there's a platform where they can be vocal about it and actually see what other people thought about it. We've now got this platform where companies are now engaging, and companies themselves and the people of those companies are all engaging in a public way with these social platforms. And that two-way interaction, I think companies like shun away from it because it's risk, right? Legal teams say no way. But on an individual level, like the smallest thing of just tagging somebody or trying to start a conversation, I mean, you leverage their influence, and it's not a paid campaign where you've got to pay someone $25,000 to post your product in. I mean, there's so many things that can be done that just aren't even tried because it's not viewed as what influencer marketing is deemed as kind of the productized marketing service, you know. My thoughts. Cool. Anything else?
And a good example of that, what you were just talking about, was actually, and it was a funny example, but the Wendy's campaign that they did, where they started calling out other companies. They were actually interacting with Burger King, they were interacting with Chick-fil-A, they were interacting with Dairy, they were interacting with all these different companies, and it was funny, and a ton of people were following it, and a ton of people were paying attention to what was going on, people were interacting. It was a really, really good campaign.
I've seen, it's probably not the most relevant example for our industry, but it's real anyway. Like Bud Light, their Twitter account is now like taking their old commercials and inserting in like major podcasts, and just like trying to like relate to the audience of that podcast because it's funny.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's like the greatest marketing ever. I mean, they're tapping into an audience of 2 to 3 million people, that they deem is their target audience, and correlating the Bud Light brand with that podcast's audience is brilliant.
Yeah.
And it's a tweet. Costs them nothing. I mean, it's that simple, and it really doesn't always have to be a partnership deal with tens of thousands of dollars being thrown around. I mean, it can literally be a conversation and making it fun. So that's it. So, how can IT companies do that? Casey, we just drove a giant map of the relationship of all these different companies.
Yes.
Yeah,
What do you think?
I feel like doing that, honestly. Like,
Think of the co-marketing that takes place, right? You've got manufacturers paying you to do marketing through all these partners, right? And through distributors, and there's investments being made across the board. Yet it tends to always be a logo that's added in versus actually having a conversation with that other company and trying to involve their end customer as well. I think something as simple as that can make a massive impact. And some companies are starting to do it by tagging manufacturer accounts, trying to tap into their audience, but those that actually look at who their audience is and trying to relate to them versus be themselves. I mean, think of the Bud Light example. Bud Light was able to successfully do that because they looked at the audience and the inside jokes of those podcasts and built miniature ads around the inside jokes of their audience. If you look at who follows IBM or somebody like that, and the term IBMers and people who have, IBM is known for family members who their entire family has worked for IBM for years and years and years, right? I guarantee you there's a lot there if someone really dug into it and could really relate to the culture of those that actually work at IBM, who they want to establish a better partnership with. So there's a ton of opportunity there, and because it's B2B, everyone kind of shies away from it because it's risk, it's different, everyone says B2B is boring, it doesn't have to be. And I think that's a huge opportunity. I've been saying that for a while. Whoever figures it out first and really is willing to take those risks and act like a person versus a company,